Welcome to Exploring the Variable Site Part 4, Combining Stages and Line Morph Hotspots. So as the name implies, today we are going to be taking our Stages demo that we just finished, and we're going to combine it with our Line Morph Hotspots demo to get something like this, where we can roll over each stage and you will see that we activate the stage animation and that highlight stroke is following wherever our mouse goes. Being that we're fairly deep in the series, please make sure you've watched the previous videos so that you understand all the code and terminology we'll be using. As we copy and paste our code, you'll find that we run into a few little issues that we're going to have to address. But don't worry, I'll walk you through it all, and these are all parts of being a developer. So we're going to start by merging the HTML and CSS from both of those demos. Here I have the multiple stages demo, and I also have the hotspots demo. So let's go into the multiple stages demo, and I'm just going to select all of the HTML, Command C to copy it out. I'm going to go into the hotspot demo, and at the bottom of the SVG code here, I'm just going to paste in that HTML. And now it's going to be very difficult to see, but it is right here, okay? We basically have black text on black. So the way we're going to get around that clearly is to grab the necessary CSS. I'm going to go into the other demo, open up the CSS panel, and I'm going to copy all of the CSS here that we have using, again, Command C. We'll go into the hotspots demo, open the CSS panel, and I'm just going to go to the bottom here where really there's only just a body tag, and I'm going to paste in the code that I just grabbed. I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to put my import statement though at the top by pasting it there, and we'll condense these two body tags. So let me just take this code here, cut it out, get rid of this body, and we'll just paste those rules right there. And now we'll see that things look so much better. Now you may notice that the text in these stages is centered, and that's because in the previous demo for the line morph, I had a text-align center in there. Not exactly sure why, because it seems that we don't need it at all. And so here we are with all of the buttons still working. And at first glance, things look sort of okay-ish. Clearly we didn't copy the JavaScript to make these stages interactive, but what I want to point out, which is fairly important, is the misalignment that we have here, okay? You'll notice that there's a little bit of padding on the side of the SVG here, and we don't really line up with the left of the button and the current stage. They're sort of all mismatched here, okay? And so what we want to do is make it so that all of the stage text is perfectly lined up with the left edge of these buttons here. Both the SVG and this multiple stages group here are totally flexible, all right? But you'll see that as I resize and things get wider and smaller, we still have this offset gap between the text and the actual buttons that go on top of them, all right? And one of the things we want to do is make sure that there isn't any arbitrary extra space on the right of the SVG or on the left. I'm going to go into the CSS really quick, and I'm just going to put a rule here for SVGs, and we'll put a red border on it. And now, of course, that's going to apply to every SVG, even the ones in GS DevTools down here. But I wanted to make it clear that there is a gap inside the SVG here. So what I want to do is get rid of that gap and make it so that the left edge of the SVG lines up with the left edge of the stage down here, and the right edge of the SVG goes all the way to the right. And the reason this alignment is so important is because the site we are being inspired by has these vertical lines in the SVG that line up with the HTML content directly beneath them, okay? And if I grab this window and resize it just a little bit, that's going to squish the SVG and the stages, and we're still going to have that perfect alignment between the vertical lines and the HTML content. So with that said, let's move ahead and edit the SVG. So in order to edit the SVG file, I want to make sure I'm using the most recent version. And that's the version we're using right here in my HTML. You may recall that we put an ID of buttons on the buttons I created, that we duplicated the path full and made path highlight. So I want to make sure I have all those changes. So I'm going to just collapse the SVG and just very quickly select all that SVG code, Command C to copy it, and I'm going to go over to Boxy SVG and I'm going to go to File, New from Clipboard, and look what we get. Here's my SVG and here's the extra space we've been seeing. Now we may just say, hey, you know what, let's just take everything and move it over to the left to get rid of that gap. Well, I'm going to go into my Elements panel and I'm going to open up the SVG code, and I want you to take note that in the path full, the D attribute starts with this M39 307 point a bunch of stuff, okay? And the path highlight, which is a duplicate, starts with exactly those same values. Well, I'm going to go up here and do a Command A to select everything, and I'm just going to use my left arrow key to start moving things over, and you can also see that that D attribute is being updated as well. So if I line everything up with the left of the stage, I just want to point out that we've literally changed the coordinates that are being used in that stroke. Now I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the SVG, do a copy outer SVG, and when I go back to my demo here, let me just take this SVG code here, delete it, and paste in the new SVG code. Watch what happens on the first run, okay? What was that? Well, GS DevTools recorded it all. You'll see that at the beginning, we get this really strange morph going on, okay? And that's because we moved those points around and things are acting a little bit funky, okay? So if we move those starting points around, we would also have to go into our JavaScript and update these from values as well, okay? But what I want to do is show you the safe way to do this. So let's go back into Boxy SVG, and I'm just going to Command Z a bunch of times to go back to where we normally started out, where we had that M39 value right here. So instead of moving everything in the document, I'm going to make sure I do a Command A to select everything, and I'm going to wrap it all in a group. So I'm going to go to Object, Group, and then with the group selected, I can then move everything over wherever I want. All right, so I'm just going to line it up really nice on the edge of the stage, like so. Now you'll see we still have this extra gap over here. And what I'm going to do is go to my geometry panel here, and it will tell me that the group is 1000 pixels wide. I'm then going to go to the outer SVG, and I'm going to change its width to 1000. Now everything is really nice and tight and tidy. I'm going to take the group and move it down a little bit. It looks like I was a little careless when moving it. And now if I right click, copy the outer SVG, go back into my demo, go back into the HTML, I can then collapse this SVG code here, select it all, delete it, paste in the updated SVG that has everything inside of that group here. And notice now both of these paths have that original M39 starting value in the D attribute. Pretty cool. And now you'll see the opening animation works just fine. And most importantly, the entire SVG stretches the entire window that I have here, edge to edge, lining up with these stages here. There's no extra space at all on the left and right. And you'll see now that these stage names are much closer lined up with the buttons that we have here that divide the SVG in perfect quarters. Well, we can get rid of that little extra space by making one more CSS change. I'm going to pop into the CSS, and here for each stage where we're setting that padding of 8 pixels on every side, I'm going to leave 8 pixels on the top, 8 pixels on the right, 8 pixels on the bottom, and 0 on the left. And now you should see that we've gotten rid of that space between the left edge of the stage and the heading text. And all of these buttons are lining up directly with the stage beneath them. Now clearly things are a little bit tight on the left and right of this document, And we can handle that by wrapping the SVG and the stages in a container div and adding a little bit of padding. So in the HTML, I'm just going to go above where my SVG code is, and I'm going to create a div with a class of main. I'll take that closing div tag, cut it out, and I'll put it beneath my stages div. And now in the CSS, what I'm going to do is just add a new rule for .main, and we're going to add a padding property with 0 on the top, 5% right, 0 bottom, 5% left. And now that gives our artwork a little bit of breathing room. And now that we know where the SVG begins and ends, we can go into this SVG rule here and just turn off that border. And another thing we want to do is get rid of the background of the stage here. And you'll see that background is set in the stage rule, and we're just going to turn that off. And now you'll see everything is floating around on our page and just looks lovely. All right, we don't have those hard edges of the background image hitting the text here. Everything is just floating nicely in place, and our buttons are totally working. But what I want to do is just update our JavaScript code so that we can roll over each stage in the HTML and get that line to follow the appropriate stage, and of course trigger our little animations that we built in the last exercise. So in order to update the JavaScript that we need, we're going to go back to the stages demo here, and I'm just going to go into that JavaScript panel, and I'm going to copy out the code that we worked on last time. Command C, we'll go back into our file, we'll jump into the JavaScript, and below where we have the button code that makes the line move around, I'm just going to paste in the code that I just grabbed. And now what we can do is roll over each of the stages, and you'll see that they work, okay? No surprises there, but I want rolling over the stages to also trigger the line segment animation that the buttons are using right now. So if we go into the button code, what's interesting here is that every time we mouse enter a button, we're just doing a GSAP 2 tween on the path highlight, and we're passing into the Draw SVG plugin the value that we get from the positions array when we pass in the current index. So remember, we have this positions array that has all the Draw SVG values. Well, inside of our stages code, we also have access to an index value as well. So right now on our mouse enter, we're just telling the current timeline to play of the current stage that we're mouse entering. I also want to trigger the proper Draw SVG animation based on the current index of the stage, just like I'm doing with the buttons. So I'm going to go up to our buttons code here, and I'm just going to copy out this to tween here using Command C. And where I'm dealing with my mouse enter code, where I'm doing the tl.play, I need to use a multi-line function here. So I'm going to have to open up some curly brackets here, and then I'm going to have to close them off. And when I'm telling the timeline to play, I'm also going to paste in a to tween on the path highlight, referencing the value that I pull out of the positions array for the Draw SVG plugin. And now what we should see is that when I roll over each stage, the line is also going to follow and position itself above the stage that I'm on top of with my cursor. Very neat. Now, as a last-minute challenge, what you could do is maybe find a way so that each one of these buttons makes the stages activate as well. I'm not going to spend time on that because what we're going to do in the next lesson is go for the full screen effect, all right, where I can roll over anywhere on the screen, and both the stroke and the stage are going to highlight at the same time. Right now it's either I roll over the stage or I roll over the buttons, okay? But remember, the variable site doesn't care where my cursor is, all right? I don't have to roll over the bottom of the page or somewhere on the actual curve. I can be all the way up top and everything's going to be interactive, all right? So that's the next piece of the puzzle, and we'll tackle it in the next video.